3, 2, 1, and here we go again. Conversations with interesting people, and today our guest is Mark Powers, who I just met a few minutes ago. But I've heard some things about you, and I've read some things about you, and I'm super excited to talk to you. But rather than me just blather on about the things that I have heard, just give us a little brief intro about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
I am a native Iowan, although I've lived in a lot of places. I am currently, I live in Cedar Rapids, president of Corridor Running. I'm involved with Run Krandik. I do some races that are extraneous from my club activities. We do a trail race out in Pleasant Creek Trail Run. And I am a volunteer at 2 prisons in the neighborhood, both the Iowa Men's Classification Center and Anamosa, where we do a volunteer running program. And fortunately, I'm retired.
Okay.
And it's because I wouldn't have time to work.
Yeah. What did you do for a living?
I spent most of my life as a sales representative. I worked for 2 companies most of that time. Wells Blue Bunny Ice Cream, and most of my career was with Frito-Lay, peddling a few brands of small companies, Lay's, Doritos, potato chips like that.
Super healthy food that all long-distance runners should be consuming. Blue Bunny, Doritos, Fritos. Hey, that's good stuff. Got to carb up, right, before you're going to do a big thing. Blue Bunny is in Lamar's.
It is.
Right? Did you live in Lamar's?
I lived here, and we had representatives, and they still do have representatives throughout the country. All the product through them is direct shipped to the store. So it's just a question. You don't have to worry anything about the delivery part of it. You just go to the stores and take care of the customers.
One of the things I think is interesting, my family's been in Iowa for many, many generations. And, I grew up in Iowa. I went through college in Iowa, and then I kind of left for a variety of reasons. Everywhere I went, I met people that knew things that were based in Iowa that did not dream they were from Iowa. And so because of my father, I knew that Blue Bunny was based in Lamar's. But I'll tell you my favorite story. So I got my graduate degree in New Jersey at an Ivy League school, because if I say the name, I just feel like a douchebag. But anyway, I was hanging out one night having beers at one of the local restaurants. And people in New Jersey, because they get made fun of by New York, they make fun of every other state. And I was with this friend who loved to make fun of me for being just this hayseed, redneck podunk from Iowa, and she decided she was going to educate me about the finer things in life. And she said to me, do you know where the finest blue cheese in the world comes from? And I said, hit me. And she goes, it comes from the country of Amana. And this blue cheese is so amazing. And I let her talk for a minute, and I went, okay, smartass, do you know where Amana blue cheese comes from? She goes, I just told you. It comes from the country of Amana. It's somewhere beyond France. And I went, no. Amana, blue and Maytag blue cheese is from the eastern part of Iowa. You would have thought I just told her that Jesus Christ was from Brooklyn. I mean, the look on her face. And so, like, every now and then something hits, like, people will be like, Glenn Miller or 4-H or something. So, so we tossed that out there about Blue Bunny. For any of you that didn't know, Blue Bunny ice cream, Lamar's, Iowa, which is over in the west, right?
Correct, western part of the state.
So you worked. You were a sales guy. Tell us about running, because that's certainly the thing that brought you to my attention. And according to your bio on the website that we're going to have linked below in the description, you've been running for a long time. So how'd you get into it? Tell us about running and how it's affected your life.
Well, running was a necessary evil to participate in wrestling when I was in high school and collegiately. It was one of those things you did to help lose weight.
Is that you? Yeah. All right. So after Cooper so really didn't turn off his phone. All right.
That's kind of how I got the start. I eventually, as you graduate from college, you put on your freshman 15, and then you graduate. My dad's health was not the best, and he needed a lung transplant. And I had always said if I could stay in condition long enough that I could give him a lung, I would do that. And unfortunately, before they were able to do that, my dad died. And I just have maintained that as a lifelong. I've been running 51 years now, gives you an indication of my age. And it becomes a lifestyle. It is something that you do. I mean, you go through. There's multiple stages of running. Those who start out with the intent of competing against everybody and beating everybody, and then you kind of graduate to the point where, all right, I do it for my health, and I do it for recreation, I do it for my sanity, you do it for your therapy, and through all of that, Adam, it's kind of like it becomes just part of your normal. Instead of shower, and you go run and then you shower. It becomes part of your day. Part of your routine. I'm
glad you added the part in there about you go run and then you shower, because it was lining up for instead of showering, I go for a run. It's like, well, unless you're hanging out with other runners who don't mind as much. Just based on what you said, running 51 years, that's got to put you in your 60s at some point. I mean, you look fantastic for being in your 60s. And so, and then, and however much you want to share or not, but we delayed the recording a little bit because you just recently had surgery. And so you want to tell us about that? Do you mind?
No, not at all. I ran 36 races last year. And
36 last year?
36 last year. It was my first full year of unbridled retirement, and I kind of made up for it, although I think I probably overdid it. But I also fell out of a tree in late December. A tree that I was trimming landed on my feet like a cat does, but in the process I tore the labrums in both my hips, and that just accelerated the arthritis that I currently had. And I was fortunate to get had surgery done in May. I had March. I had another one done 4 weeks ago tomorrow, and had total hip replacement. And it's to take a person, I don't care who it is, you take a person that's got a routine that they're very actively involved with, and then tell them you can't do it for a while.
Yeah,
it's a sanity check.
Totally.
And I'm eager to get back up. A longtime friend of mine last night sent me an email, said, guess what? I found out that I have to have my hips replaced. And it was almost cathartic to be able to say, hey, I can walk you through this. I can help you get to that point. And there's hope on the opposite side of it. A local runner had an accident, smashed up both her hips and her pelvis, completed a 100-miler here 2 weekends ago. So it's, she's got youth on her side where I don't, but the reality of it is that I think there's some athleticism or something that you can do post-surgery that going into it, I certainly didn't think that was a possibility.
Yeah. So my mom, who's older than you, my mom's in her mid-70s. Actually, it's her birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah, happy birthday, Mom. This will air in a while. But my mother is currently in China, where she is spending the month going on. She's retired as well, just newly retired, and she's exploring the world. I'm super proud of her. Wow. So actually, just since I'm being indulgent with this story, yesterday was my birthday. My mother called me at about 5 p.m. our time, which was about 6 a.m. in the morning their time. So my mother called me, and it was her birthday and my birthday at the same time. And I have to tell you, I'm such a nerd. I thought that was super cool. And she was like really excited. She's like, oh, this is the only time we're ever going to get to do this. Anyway, she had both her hips replaced. I had just moved to Iowa City, so it was 7 and so years ago. And the thing that really struck me was that my mother, stubborn, I wonder where I get it from, and my grandfather was too. She was in so much pain, and she waited and waited and waited and waited. She was walking with canes and a walker, and just so much pain. Got them replaced and could climb mountains. I mean, still to this day, when I see her move and play with my toddler, I think to myself, wow. And my mother fell into that classic camp of, God, I wish I had known, because I would have done it. I would have done this 10 years ago. And so I tell patients that sometimes when they're really afraid of it. Given what you just said about your friend, was that kind of your experience too?
Yes. The difference with me is that things accelerated rapidly, and it was accelerated by the fall.
Sure.
So the x-rays each month, if you looked at the degeneration of the cartilage, it went rapidly. And I think I've always had, not always, I've developed over the last several years some nuance, some pain in areas that I assume that's what it was.
Okay.
I've been real fortunate. It is absolutely amazing. I see runners that, there's a gal in Cedar Rapids that broke her ankle 3 different places. I can story after story after story where you go into it and you think the hope for maintaining that same level of activity, or at least participating in after an injury is slim. And what the doctors do today, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say you ran 36 races, do you mean marathons? Do you mean a combo of 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons, half marathons, ultras? Like, what's your distance? What do you like?
I like long distance. For me, that long distance means different than for others. There's a group in Iowa City in particular that when you talk long distance, they're thinking 100 plus miles. For me, I prefer the 50K to 100K distance. It's something that you can still do within a day. It's beyond a normal challenge. I love the trail system. 19 years ago, I've had 2 back surgeries. 19 years ago, I said, the doctor told me at that point, if you get off the hard surface roads and do a little bit more on the trail system, that you'll be able to run longer.
Yeah.
And I've done that. And last year of those races, I went to Georgia for a 5K just because it was the highest elevation climb in a 5K in Georgia.
Oh, wow.
I went to South Carolina. I ran through an old artillery field, a 50K that was there. And here's a Pona kid from Iowa. I came in second.
That's so awesome.
You go to Indiana and you run through a foot of mud and snow and rain for a 50-miler, and had some success there. I like those kinds of distances. I love the trail. I love the nature. I love the tranquility. I love being away from all the cars and all the automation that goes with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you read Born to Run?
A few times.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have lost count, but to try to not talk about myself the whole time, I want to tell you about my running journey a little bit, because I was in the military and I ran because I had to. Mm-hmm. And I've always been heavy, been overweight my whole life, struggled with my weight my whole life. And so when I got into medical school, I got into doing 5Ks and 10Ks because I thought it was fun to compete a little bit. I'm a naturally competitive person. I just suck at it. But it's like I power lift, and I always tell people I'm not a good power lifter, but I like to compete. And so actually who would become my first wife recommended the TED Talk by Chris McDougall about Were We Born to Run? And so I have read Born to Run with my eyes 3 times, and I got the audio CDs. And when I was driving around North Carolina, where I went to medical school, I've heard it at least 10 times cover to cover. And that led me to Scott Jurek's books, and I'm actually Facebook friends with Barefoot Ted and have talked to him. I was Facebook friends with Caballo Blanco and exchanged emails with him before he died. And so here I'm in North Carolina, I'm in the Smoky Mountains, and I too got into trails because my dream, and I'm never going to give it up, even though it's probably not going to happen, is that I would my sister got into marathons and Ironman. Ironmen is plural, Ironmen or Ironmans. Anyway. Every time I got to 10 miles or 11 miles, my IT bands light on fire. And I hate my IT bands, and I hate my IT band syndrome, and it's one of that and PF are like the things that just plague runners. And I've watched every video, I've done every stretch, I've gone to 100. My PT in North Carolina was 100 plus ultra guy, and he gave me all these things that never got better. And so I sort of focused on 5Ks and 10Ks, and then I read Born to Run. And I started running trails, and I started wearing no shoes or 5 fingers, or I started going to a midfoot strike, and all of a sudden I could do 10 trail miles. Now they're slower because they're over uneven ground, and I'd walk up the big hill, right? If you can't see the top, walk, right? But it changed my life, and unfortunately I overdid it because I hit 10 miles for the first time. I ran a 10-mile race on gravel. It was awful. But anyway, and then I thought I was invincible. I thought I found it. Like it's midfoot strike, it's minimal shoes, it's trails, not whatever. And I went for like my third 10 plus mile run in 3 days, and the IT bands lit on fire.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, since it broke my spirit a little bit. And since then, I've rarely gone back to it. But Born to Run was so inspiring. And this leads me into now to let you talk. 2 enormous things happened in the world of running this past weekend.
Incredible.
Before you and I had this set up before that was going to happen. So if we had a huge audience, they would think that I brought you in to talk about that. But instead of me continuing to blather about it, you tell us what happened this past weekend.
Well, I'm assuming that you're talking specifically about the marathon.
Yep.
What will be tested as the world record in men's and
women's
both done
side by side.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? Just phenomenal. Both of them, the elusive 2 hour. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Jim Ryan ran the sub 4 minute mile. And to think, we harkened back to that last week as we were, and I got up in the middle of the night and watched this on the internet as he's breaking that record. And as you saw him push that last 500 or 600 meters with full throttle, it's like, how can you do that in an hour and 59 minutes and 40 seconds? Set a new world record.
Pronounce the guy's name.
I can't.
Yeah, see, neither can I. Cooper, pull it up for us. But it's like Iliad something. So he's from Ethiopia, Olympic champion. He's basically won, if you look at his Wikipedia page, he's basically won every marathon he's ever been in pretty much. And the thing is, breaking the 2 hour mark in the marathon has been this thing. I turned 41 yesterday. My whole time I've ever watched running. And he didn't just break it. So I've been saying for years, someone's going to run 1:59:58, and it's going to be incredible. And he smoked it. 1:59:40. Yeah. He had time to tie his shoe afterwards and wave to the crowd. So I mean, so amazing. And yes, so here it is.
Yep.
And again, pardon us too, white guys from Iowa, but Eliud Kipochke or something like that. Yep. Now, of course, what they're going to say is it was a closed course. It wasn't a real race. He had pacers, he whatever else. But the thing that struck me is that when I was really into running before, I studied the story of Roger Bannister. Mm-hmm. So again, you're the guest. Tell us about what you know about Roger Bannister.
Not what you do, because you've studied it. Not what you do.
Okay.
Help me out with that.
So Roger Bannister was an English physician. He was studying to be a neurologist. In fact, when I was in school, Bannister's book on neurology is still considered to be a very...
Really?
Medical technology has obviously advanced quite a bit. So I've been out of medical school 7 years, and half of what I learned is obsolete. But so in terms of his research, he was the first person to ever break the 4 minute mile.
Yep.
And I can't tell you the date. Look up Roger Bannister for us so we know what the date is. But the thing is, so Bannister trained in a very unusual way compared to what the kind of accepted training methods of the day were. And then, but he ran on a closed course. It was not a real race. He had pacers and so forth. But Bannister is still considered to be the person who broke the 4 minute mile. And he was spending most of his time studying and so forth. So he died a few years ago.
Yep.
And so let's see, he broke the record. It's going to tell us somewhere.
1954 he accomplished.
Yeah, there you go.
I was born.
And so here's and notice his exact time, 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. And so, but here is the amazing thing, and this is exactly what's going to happen. Now that the 2 hour has been broken, someone's going to do it in a race. And when Bannister broke the 4 minute mile, it was considered, this again, to me, I think dates medical science, but it was considered, it will never happen. The human body will die. You can't possibly do that. Well, of course, that's ridiculous. And as soon as Bannister broke it, all of a sudden, everyone could do it. And I think the current world record in the mile is El Garouge, and it's 3:20 something. I mean, so he smoked that.
Isn't that incredible?
And so what's going to happen is it may not be this guy, but somebody else is going to break it in a race, and there's going to be some naysayers who are going to go, well, that's the guy that really has the record. Nope. Just like Bannister. If it's not, I'm going to call racism. Because it was a black guy from Ethiopia, and but anyway, he gets it. As far as I'm concerned, he's the first guy to ever do it. It was all on camera. It wasn't like he came into an interview and said, "Well, guess what I did when nobody was watching in my backyard." I mean, we clearly had an official time on it, so it's such a cool thing.
I think he's won 11 or 12 of the marathons that all but one of them, I believe, that he's participated in. I think he was at a 2 hour marathon and a 2:01. So he's been right on that
current
threshold.
World record holder.
Yes.
He was the Olympic gold medalist. Just incredible. When I was at Duke and I would run those trails, there was a group of of people trying to get on the track team in Jamaica that were training. And it was so amazing. I think the runners from sub-Saharan Africa are just astounding. And and of course the Jamaicans are not sub-Saharan African, but it's the closest thing I've seen in real life. They would run as a pack, and they would run with one person in the front, and then there was a guy who was, they were all men and one woman. There was a guy that was the leader, and he would call, and they would switch position like bikers who draft. And the thing was, by the time, so my fat ass is out there running like I'm a midfoot striker. You could hear me coming a mile away, back to Born to Run. Like if you're trying to do persistence hunts, whatever else. By the time that group would they'd come up behind me and they'd just blow past me. By the time they got close enough to me for me to hear them, they were already on me. And they would break in the center and go out around me and reform in front of me like Mercury. It was just, and you'd never hear them. And the last person in line would turn and look back at me and smile, and so they were being cool about it. But I can only, when you watch that guy on TV, and then this brings us to number 2, what happened over the weekend, just the ability to run and be so light, and it looks like nothing. It looks like they're floating on air.
It seems to be effortless. However,
right, running 433 miles for 26 of them is anything but effortless, right?
In all fairness, too, you can go to multiple places throughout the world, especially here in the United States, and find courses that are very flat. And people do that with the sole intention of setting records. Boston qualifiers or timing that,
right,
because of the layout of the course, it's conducive to those things. So I prefer this methodology having been done than it was a year ago when it was on a completely different course where somebody was trying to break that sub 2 hour and didn't get it accomplished.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, the other thing that's nice about he was there for that purpose is that you never know when somebody realizes he might do it and decides to throw a shoulder at him. And I don't want to be that way and accuse competitors of wanting to thwart an attempt, but it's sort of like in baseball when the guy's going to break the home run record or a quarterback's going to whatever, they won't pitch the ball to him. It always makes me mad because it's like, really, I mean, come on, when you're not going to play because you don't want to be the pitcher that threw the ball that broke the record.
In running, and maybe it's because I'm an amateur, but when you see an elite runner that disqualifies or stops running partway through because they're not in competition for first or second or third place, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you know what you're putting into that, and you continue to drive through to that finish line while some of those guys will look at you and say, I'm not going to be competitive, I'm done. Might
Yeah.
stop at 16, 17 miles.
It's so hard, and I have never been, nor will I ever be at that level. But one of my friends from college is a guy named Chris Bagg. He's got 2 G's behind his name. He's a professional triathlete. His best finish was 3rd at Ironman Canada a handful of years ago. And Bagg and I haven't been in touch for a long time. Shout out to Chris. If you're ever in the area, I'll have you on the show. But I saw an interview with him where he said, and this makes sense because I'm with you. I never thought about it, which is if this is your job, if you finish, you're going to be a lot more tired than if you stop, and you might be able to run a race in a couple weeks versus if you power through to the end. And of course, he was. I'm sure at Kona you finished a finish, and Kona just happened. But if you're at a qualifying one and you're not competitive. At the same time, though, I'm about this much competitive. Someone like Chris is going to be that much competitive. And then if you're Jan Frodeno, you're like 3-time Ironman world champion. To stop, I think, would just rip your heart out. Have you ever had to DNF?
I have had DNFs, but not because I didn't finish the race. It's because I didn't show up.
Oh, so DNSs
primarily. Yeah. That's just a benchmark for me that it's been, if I'm going to show up, I'm going to work my way through it. I had one of those races last year that was one of the ugliest days that I probably had. And I bet every runner that's out there, everybody that's into triathlon has had those. And you plied your way through it, perhaps not to the standard that you'd expected. I mean, let's face it, last week with 36 races, there were some of those races that were back to back to back to back. And at some point in time, you're questioning not only what you're doing, but how you're doing it and what gets you through it. And when you're ultra competitive, there isn't a person out there that I'm following or that I don't look at and say, if I can pick you off, I'm going to do it. But my standards have had to change because of my age.
Okay. Yeah, it's I've had that happen too, where I didn't show up because I didn't think I was ready. And although the only really good running story that I have was I ran a 10K in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, and I wasn't feeling it that day. And I thought, I was halfway through. So for those of you that don't know kilometers, it's a 6.2 mile race. So I was about halfway through. I wasn't feeling it, but I was literally far enough away from the start that it wouldn't have made sense to stop. Turned off my watch, turned off my trackers, and just ran.
Yep.
Finished the race, got in the car, drove back to Durham, and when I looked at the website later, I'd actually taken third place in my age group, but I didn't stay to get my medal or whatever. And that was the only time I've ever placed in any race. But I just figured, wow. I mean, I had actually it was a great time. Yeah. It was both fun and whatever. And I had a good time. Like, it was fun to not track what I was doing, but it was a good race time. It was a really good 10K finish for me. And I think that's one of those things that, and we've been alluding to this, which is for those of us that are not going to make a living doing it, I think at some point it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, what are we doing?
Yeah, and we all go through that. Could be this race because of a friend of ours is going to show up. I'm going to do everything I can to beat them. But some of the coaching that I've been fortunate to be able to participate in, and the races that I've run myself, when you do that, if fun isn't part of it, what are you doing there?
Yeah.
When you finish a race, I always train or ask those that train with us to think about their approach. If you don't finish first, if you don't finish, nothing else happens, right?
Right.
So the first goal becomes to finish. The second goal for me, for most everybody, is when you're done, is to have fun. To be able to enjoy what you did, not have to lay on the ground either vomiting your heart out or you're on your way to the emergency room. And I've literally been with races where people have passed out, died in front of me, got sick, gone to the hospital.
Died in front of you?
Yeah, I was the first time that happened
Damn.
with me is the first time I think it was 2005, I did Pikes Peak Marathon. And it's a half marathon up, Pikes Peak, half marathon down. And you get a tree line that is about 11,000 feet where the elevation changes. There's no thin enough oxygen atmosphere that the trees aren't growing. And there was a father-son that were actually running together that day. Dad had a heart attack and died.
God.
I had another situation like that occurred in Marine Corps Marathon. Things like that
DC,
happen.
Right?
Yeah, in DC. It's rare. But that's the thing. When you step up the start line, you have no idea what the person has gone through when they're next to you.
Right.
I could look at you, and I can make an assessment. Man, I don't look like a runner. They may kick your ass.
Yeah.
They may just run you into the ground. And at the same time, they may not. They may be there. This is their once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to try and do a bucket list item.
Yeah.
And it may be an old fart like me that says, I'm here because I'm enjoying this. I've waited my lifetime to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. One of the points I think you made that's a good one about setting goals. Jeff Galloway is one of my idols. Someone I would love to meet. I was close when I was in North Carolina. He was going to be at a thing, and then something happened, and either I couldn't go. I think I had to work. But is that in his books about marathoning, well, really any race, but specifically the ones about marathon, is for your first handful of them, finishes your goal. And he gives this example. It's I want to finish a marathon, and I want to qualify for Boston, and I want to lose 10 pounds, and I want to break 4 hours. And he goes, so let's just play out this scenario. You just ran 26.2 miles. You feel like a failure because you had this other goal that was, I only lost 6 pounds, not 10, and you feel like crap, and you just ran a marathon. So the goal should be, in the beginning, should be to finish, and that really struck me. And I use that in therapy with patients sometimes when it's, I want to graduate and get this degree, and I want to whatever. It's like, well, but let's think about this for a second. Like, because you can set, there are goals you can control and goals that you can't. And obviously, you can't control if you finish. I mean, you might break your ankle. My sister in the Chicago Marathon stepped in a pothole at mile 2, and at mile 14, looked down, and her leg looked like a cantaloupe or something like that. And it was like, better stop that. But so I think it's always good, like you say, to keep things in perspective. Finish, have fun, don't be dying, don't be puking your guts out and whatever else.
Race day shows up. In my opinion, you have to take what the day gives you. Circumstances change. The number of people that are in that race, the course, the weather, what you ate, the preparation, the stress that you're under, all of those fall under that umbrella of how am I going to do? And the first thing is just to get your head clear and just say, I'm here, I'm going to have fun, I'm going to make the most out of it. When you can do that, then I think you can start to focus on clock next, timing next, ulterior goals like what you're talking about.
Right. So we got a little off topic, but I want to make sure we give her a shout out as well, because on Saturday, the guy broke the 2-hour mark. And I almost thought I was being punked when the next day at the Chicago Marathon, Mark, what happened?
New world record set. Once again, I can't pronounce her name. Female.
From Ethiopia, right?
Yep. Broke I'm not sure the number of years of record.
Long-standing record.
Yeah.
The part I liked the best, and this was the picture that I retweeted, was the previous record holder, whose name was Paula Radcliffe, was at the race, and she went out beyond the finish line, and they took pictures together.
Isn't that cool?
Which to me is like the ultimate level of classy. First of all, Paula Radcliffe doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. Second of all, that shows a true sportsman. And I'm a scientist, and I come from the world of science, where a true scientist, even if he or she has worked their entire life on this one theory, evidence proves it's something else, the real scientist goes, I was wrong. The true sportsman doesn't get all pissy and like, whoa, my record and whatever else. It's like, that's so awesome. Look what you just did. And so that was just super cool. And I was just floored. It was like just 2 things in 2 days. Like how awesome is that?
That record will stand for a while.
Probably.
But I suspect that as in any of those, there's always a target on somebody's back. They'll it's just phenomenal. It's incredible. To that point, even here in eastern Iowa, you look around the neighborhood, we've got some phenomenal runners that come from Iowa that have trained in Ethiopia and have trained overseas for months and months on end, that come back here and do some 2-hour 20, 2-hour 15, 2-hour 18 marathons. That once again, that hayseed, how does somebody from Iowa who has nothing to work with do that? And we have those runners in the community.
Why is Boston sort of become this like marker of greatness? Anybody that gets involved in running beyond just, like you said, running for health or running because they feel like they have to, or anybody who gets competitive, at some point you're going to start hearing about Boston and BQ races and whatever else. First of all, have you ever run Boston? And second of all, like, tell everybody your opinion about why Boston has become this, like, I don't know, this Mount Olympus of the marathon world.
It has a very rich tradition. Aside from that, it's a beautiful course. Add into that it requires qualification, which means that you have to run particular times, and those have changed over the years.
Yeah, they get faster.
Yes, and now it's, even if you qualify within that time, it's within that division, who's the fastest underneath the qualifying times. You add all of that into it. Pomp and circumstances has gone with it. Yes, I have run it. When I ran it, I was 3 weeks post 3-disc rupture.
Oh, God.
And I was happy just to be able to get off the plane when I landed and run it. You're absolutely right. We hear more about a BQ qualifier than probably anything else. You've got some phenomenal races out there that are the same thing. New York is one of those, in my opinion. I can take you throughout different parts of the country or the world. There's 7 major marathons that local. You can go to Rome. I don't even know where to begin because there's so many of them. But Boston seems to draw that elite athlete all the way to the amateur that says, someday I'm going to do Boston.
Yeah.
There's countless runners that are local runners that target races, say, hey, I'm going to go do Lincoln because I have my best chance to do Boston. We created a race here locally a couple of years ago, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, but the first criteria everybody says, is it a BQ qualifier? Are we going to be able to run Boston from that? And a lot of the courses that are set for Boston, they're the faster courses, which are typically a little flatter and a little less obstruction. And initially, I kind of laughed. I said, "You're running the hills through eastern Iowa. You think you're going to qualify for Boston?" After year 2, yeah, I do think people will qualify for Boston. We'll get there.
Yeah, there's so many cool stories, and I'm having to dig back in my memory of like there's a race done on the Great Wall of China. I remember hearing about, there's one, it isn't a marathon, but there's one called the Dip Sea.
Yes.
The Dip Sea race.
California.
And it's got all these stairs on it, and there's a great documentary called The Dip Sea Demon about Jack what's-his-name that ran it a million times, and he's died since that movie it was done. But it was so many interesting ways to encounter having talked to you now for 40 minutes, I have a sense what you're going to say, but the color runs got really popular, and I think they've kind of died out a little bit. The Spartan type races, the whatever else, I remember some of my friends that were purists, so to speak, thought that the rock and roll ones and whatever were just garbage, just like, this is just commercialized crap. And my other side of that argument is, but if you can get people to get out there and move. So what do you think about some of those?
Oh, I'll get myself in trouble with somebody the way I answer this, but there has been in our lifetime a huge growth in the number of races that are out there. With that came the fun runs, which were strictly fun. They were focused on youth, adults that perhaps maybe wouldn't normally participate. Let's get some of that revenue into the marketplace. Not all of them focused on the activity of health. That's probably alienated somebody already when they hear that. But the reality of it is, if you find that you are a more, I don't want to use the word serious, but if you're a more focused runner that says, I'm going to go out and compete with myself for a particular time. And that's who really, at the end of the day, most of us competed with, right? You go pick a 10K that you run, you might have a buddy that's out there, but if you're not, you talked about it earlier, if you're not satisfied with your own results, then that's who you compete with on the next one.
Right.
I'm not a huge proponent of the color runs, the glow runs. Have I done them? Yes. I've had the cornstarch thrown in my face, inhale it a few times. It's it's fun once and done for me. They do draw a good revenue. There's companies throughout the country that will come into our market and walk out with $45,000-$50,000 of revenue because of those activities. Mm-hmm. Chocolate runs. There's a lot of fun runs that are done. So whatever your motive is for
Krispy
running,
Kreme, beer ones,
whatever your motive is, that's probably who's going to draw that.
Yeah.
On the more serious side, those who are looking at it from a more competitive, not the elites, but those, I call them a weekend warrior, which is pretty much what I am. Every weekend I go out and beat myself up and then try and survive all week long to make it to the next activity. Those are more of the 5Ks, the 10Ks, the half marathons. Half marathons probably the most popular distance in the country currently, because it's tough to get to, but it's also achievable. Statistically, what do they say? That 1% of the population will run a marathon. Well, out of 350 million people, if you get 35, what's 1%? 35 million. If you get 1% of, it wouldn't be that. It'd be 3.5 million. People that run a marathon. That's pretty phenomenal in and of itself. I'm not a huge, as it is, I'm not a huge proponent of that kind of a run.
I still want to get there so bad and do a marathon someday, and not break myself in the process. I had a PT say to me once, we can get it to where you can push through with your IT bands and grit your way through. And I was like, yeah, dude, but I don't want to do it and jack myself up, which leads me to what I want to talk about next, which is, so you talked about doing ultras. There's a group that does ultras. Born to Run talks about, Leadville and the one in Death Valley. And, to me, this is my competitive spirit. If I could run 100-mile races, 100-plus mile. I would do them all the time because I think it would be amazing to be able to run 100 miles. I think it would be incredible. In North Carolina, where I went to medical school, they do a 100-mile race in a state park that is a loop, so you don't need a crew because you can run back to your car. Basically, it's like two laps winds up being a marathon. So it's every half marathon you can loop back but it's. I think there are people that would say there's a level at which it becomes obsession. It's no longer healthy. This guy ran 36 races last year and his hips are jacked up. People use it as an eating disorder tool. I mean, is there a point it's too far? Is it as dangerous as people might think? Are they overblowing that in your opinion?
It's hard for me to answer because what you're capable of doing and what Cooper might be capable of, or me, is different. I went to a foot clinic in Des Moines, Fitness Sports, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago. Gal had run 450 miles. It took her 2 years to recuperate her feet.
God.
To me, that's extreme. That probably is not smart. But at the same time, I look at it and say, man, if I could run 450 miles, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I don't know that I don't know that I will invest that amount of time to do that. Buddy of mine ran Pikes Peak, got down at the end of Pikes Peak, the downhill side of it, the front of his toes were ruined.
Yeah.
Took him months to get recovery on that. Is that an extreme? I work with a runner recently that 9 of his 10 toes are black and blue. Somebody would say that's an extreme. I worked with others or no other runners that pass out at the end of a race and end up in the hospital because of dehydration or things like that. Everybody's going to find somebody that says that's too much. My mom, God rest her soul, said for years, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting yourself. To this day, I've run 85 marathons. I've done almost as many ultras, a lot of other races. I don't have bad knees. How do you historically this story was, you're ruining your knees, you're ruining your knees, you're ruining your knees.
That's what was so interesting in Born to Run, because here I was a medical student, hearing the same thing, a little bit of exercise is good. And then you get into Daniel Lieberman's theory about the persistence hunting. And one of the great mysteries is, how did humans get enough calories for our brains to explode? My friends in the vegan community would say it was due to the access to extra carbohydrate. But then Lieberman's theory is we were for persistence hunting. If you run heel toe, which is very new since the 70s, since Phil Knight and what's his name, Bill Bowerman, created the running shoe. If you look at it biomechanically, so that's what got to me, because here I am, I'm at this elite institution, and there's biomechanical people all around me, and so if you run and you strike and it goes right up your knee, right up your leg into your knee, versus if you can use like a shock absorber and get that midfoot strike, and those people would say, well, if you run correctly, the way that humans do. I watch my nearly 4-year-old who's never run with a shoe in her life. She naturally is a midfoot striker. She stays leaned forward. I remember watching her when she first learned to run and saying to my wife, you see how she runs? Mm-hmm. She hasn't learned to do it wrong yet.
Yes, absolutely.
She runs like a human, like a human animal, No one teaches a dog how to run. It sort of knows,
From a technical perspective, of all the developments with all the shoes, the reality of it is, in my opinion, that if we were to run more natural, that we're physiologically better off. Yet we seek out the fanciest shoes, the prettiest shoes, the newest shoes.
They are so good at marketing them to us too. It's like, they get famous, just like anything else, cars, whatever. They get famous people, good-looking people, like see flashy colors. They lights up when you run. I mean,
Yeah.
Do you have you ever done minimalist shoes or barefoot, or are you a shoe guy?
I qualify a shoe guy as quantity or because I think as a runner I have more than my fair share of shoes.
Yeah.
I do run in a minimalist shoe. In the last several years, I've stayed with a brand that's called Ultra. Ultra's got a zero drop. It's got a splayed toe. The front of the toe box is much bigger.
Sure.
And I've learned for me on long endurance runs that I need that expansion in my feet. Yeah. And
because your feet will swell. For
swell.
people listening
Yep.
don't know.
Yep.
Also, I know what this means, but just in case someone doesn't know, tell us what zero drop means.
Zero drop simply means that from at your forefoot and your heel have the same distance to the ground. So that in a typical shoe, and you can probably equate that in an exaggerated perspective, a high heel shoe, there's a huge difference between the angle of the heel and the foot, the forefoot. In a zero drop shoe, it's basically flat. There may be cushion between you and the ground, but there's no difference in elevation in that.
Right. It's one of the things that's amazing when you think about Bannister and people before Bannister and after. For a while. I mean, Bannister was running in what we would almost call a dress shoe.
Yeah.
Today. And so we think about, it's got to be cushy, it's got to be whatever. And then you mentioned the Rome Marathon, one of the most famous runnings of the Rome Marathon. I think it was in the Olympics, which was in Rome, which is when Abebe Bikila took his shoes off and carried them and ran barefoot on the cobblestones because it was easier, to sort of run like that. I mean, and again, I'm sort of quoting Chris McDougall, which would be a dream guest for me to have on. Shout out to Chris McDougall. If anybody knows Chris McDougall, come to Iowa. I want to interview you. But, he talks a lot about how the rest of our bodies over, hundreds of thousands and millions of years evolved to be on this planet, to where we can do intravascular surgery in our eyes and our hands and whatever. But the one part of our body that touches the ground, no, it's just flawed and broken and shitty. And we need to do, I don't know how many times I've been told I need to get super fancy inserts. And every time, and I've gotten them twice, every time it's worse. And I wound up in the middle of my runs taking them off and just being like, I can't, because I'm told I'm an overpronator.
Okay.
So it's trying to jack with my knee, and then it starts to hurt on the inside of the knee because it's not able to move. And that's why trails were so good to me. I'd run, I'd walk, I'd saunter, I'd sprint. Downhill is 1,000 times harder. Like you mentioned, your friend going downhill. One of the things that really shocked me doing trails was that it wasn't easier to run downhill. I had to cut it in zigzags so I didn't wind up
trashing your quads.
Yeah, exactly. You can just trash yourself. You'd think, oh, it's like on a bike. You're like, downhill's awesome. You're running. You're like, oh God, downhill. Ugh.
Yeah, it does take its toll on you, and a lot of times, in my opinion, extreme mountain bikers that are able to ride their bikes. I did a trail race in Colorado. It's a playground for kids, adults. It's a 120 miler last year in August, and bicyclists that were trying to go up the elevations that we were, they typically have quads that beat the rest of us in a lot of running. But it's I believe the minimalist shoe. There's a 5-finger shoe that's been out for a while that was kind of the forefront of that. I've run, and there's still some people that are still doing that. I ran with a guy last week, a friend of ours that wears his. I've seen people wear wingtips, to your point. Look at Jim Thorpe. If you look at when he finished the race that he did, he had 2 different shoes on. And it wasn't because 2 different style of feet. It's what he could afford at the time.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's easy to go out and drop $100 to $200 on a pair of shoes. And that's one pair of shoes. And then you buy into and I do this, you buy into, I don't want to wear the same shoe every day, so I might end up with 3 or 4 pair of shoes that I'm going to wear during the course of the week, of course. If it's hot, you're sweating, that shoe's full of water when you're done because of perspiration. It might sit for 2 days while you dry it out. If you're hitting a muddy trail, it might be trash for a couple of days until it dries out, so you're always rotating shoes in and out. But I go back to my daughter in college, like what your daughter, in high school, the soccer coach, run barefoot. Everything they did in training was running barefoot, and the issues that they had, in my opinion, were considerably less than most of us who run in a corrected shoe.
Your body on hard surface will not let you run heel to toe very long.
Yeah,
because it's going to feed back. And so, which is why, and I knew we'd talk about Born to Run and all that at some point, but, you mentioned that the doc said if you run on sort of softer terrain in the trail, your knees will last longer. The people that are hardcore into the barefoot movement, the barefoot Teds of the world, would tell you that that hard surfaces are even better because your foot's not, it's a solid surface. I got to say that even in the height, 'cause I used to run in 5 fingers when I was doing trails in North Carolina. That was my favorite.
Yep.
I could feel the ground better. I told you I ran that one on gravel. It was awful. Even with the 5 fingers, by the end of that 10 miles, I was hurting. But anyway, I always found running on concrete was bad. I didn't ever like it. If I was going to run on concrete, I wore a normal shoe, but on trails it was a little bit different. But anyway, I think it's interesting that there's such a divide kind of in the world, and that's what in the world of running, which says to me there's not an answer. So like you said, different physicality. What can Cooper do? What can you do? People saying, "Oh no, I would never do that," and you get the people that do really well in the minimalist stuff, and you get Tony Krupicka that shaves off part of his shoes, and I don't know. It's a cool world.
Runners are, I won't say they're a unique breed, but they will do whatever they think is necessary to give them an advantage over somebody else or to make them feel better. I work with, I do a volunteer work, and I can tell you a couple of guys, because they can't afford a good shoe, put paper towels in the soles of their shoes to help some of the cushion part of it. But you'll see people run in anywhere from Converse, black and white flat Converse shoes,
Chuck Taylors.
Yeah, Chuck Taylors. You do what you can at that point in time.
I think people that are competitive are going to look for an edge where they can. And sometimes it goes to the level of insanity, but I think it's also where you get these advances, because you get these smart people that go, okay, let's test our VO2 max. And then, let's, again, from Born to Run, he talks about people were testing their shoes by putting them in bathtubs and pulling them out, figuring out which one's dried and how fast, and they smashed the record at Leadville. Which, at least in that book, Leadville is sort of heralded as one of the hardest 100-milers on the planet because of the elevation.
Absolutely.
And people get pulmonary edema and all kinds of stuff. And I think that gets back to people who think it's a little bit crazy. But any sport, you're going to find that. You're going to find the Tour de France guys juicing up. You're going to find the weightlifting guys on steroids. You're going to find the baseball guys on steroids. Because if it's money plays a part of it, but even if there's not, people want to win that. And I think that if you're not one of those kind of competitive people, you're never going to get it in the same way.
I probably do more work nowadays with less front of the pack runners, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all. As the numbers of participants in running has grown, you get a lot more variety. So you get people that are capable of doing 1 or 2 races a year. That's what they plan for. Middle of the pack, back of the front of the pack, all the way to the back of the pack. But you kind of cater to what they're capable of, and work with that, whether it's shoes, whether it's competition. But I will tell you, I paced a marathon here a couple years ago, slower than I normally do. And what I learned from the back of the pack at that point in time is those people work just as hard. They're out there longer than everybody else. And in a lot of races, not everything is at the finish line is as thrilling as it is if you're at the front of the pack. So you try and cater to those folks as well. But and they have some of the same concerns, same issues, same, can I do this? Can I get there? But it's not, can I do it in, and they're watching the clock as much as anybody. They may have been, at that point, we were averaging a 13 minute, 15 second mile per hour pace, 6-hour marathon. They're just as concerned about, can I come in at 5:58, 5:40, 3:40 is way out of line. But can I get there? And
especially if they're going to shut the course off at 6 hours.
Yep, especially.
But it's again, I haven't ever got to do one. But when my sister ran the Ironman in Kona, I think it was 2010, and she said, my time would have been better, but I took 25 minutes on a Leahy Drive to high five every single person, because they said to us, you might as well. I mean, it's, you're at that point, you're going to finish. It's right there, and it's as close to a rock star as you're ever going to be. And it's the same kind of thing. Like, if you're not going to come in the top 10, which 99.99% of us, even if it was our full-time job to train for Chicago or New York or Des Moines, we're not gonna beat the elite, whatever. We might as well enjoy it and have fun. There was a runner I used to follow, a writer and a runner named John the Penguin Bingham.
Yep.
And he talked about, I pay the same amount of money as the guy that runs it in 2 hours and 30 minutes, but I take 6 hours. My dollar per entertainment ratio is dramatically better than those people that run it in 3 hours. So I'm enjoying my time on the course more.
Those two names that you just, from John Galloway to the Penguin.
Jeff Galloway.
Jeff Galloway. They've all appealed to the masses in different strategies of how do you complete a race. Some of them it's a run-walk cycle. Some of it's run. I mean, there was a local runner that did Hennepin 100 recently. Part of her strategy was to run 9 minutes and walk 3. Run 9 minutes and walk 3. A local runner just finished another race at the Superior. A local runner won the race. Started out of 100 people, started out in 60th position. And it was a strategy that you just plug away. You maintain your integrity, your pace. And at the 10-mile mark was number 50, and at the 20-mile mark was number 40, and at the 30-mile mark, and by the time she was at the 50-mile mark and the 60-mile mark, she's just slowly, steadily picking people off. Yeah. All kinds of different competition. A lot of runners that will start out balls, their kick-ass coming out of the start line and think, I gotta stay with the front runners, and fizzle out fast. I like the other way. Yeah. Start out a little bit conservative and pick up that momentum.
That's what Galloway talks about have a kick at the end.
Yep.
I always did run walk. I always followed I was a Galloway disciple. In fact, I emailed him once and he wrote back to me because I had this thing I used to call playing Galloway leapfrog. Yeah. And I said to him, you can use that in a book if you ever want to. And he actually wrote back to me and he said, listen, I don't use it right back, but like I thought you'd said it well. So like in your run phase, you pass these people and then they pass you when you walk. You get to the place where you're so far ahead of them, you go through a whole walk cycle and they don't catch up to you. You got more people ahead of you. And not that I was ever super competitive, but I always outkicked people because when I could see the finish line, I would just take off. Yeah. And you mentioned the guy that broke the 2 hours. Here's a guy, I can't run 1 mile as fast as he ran every mile. But when he saw the end, he just took off. He had a whole other gear, which means in his life, because he's not that old, he's probably going to break that one even still.
Yeah,
I mean, it just, but yeah, I mean, and plus it lets you feel like let me at it. I've got more in me versus I crawl across the finish line dead. And
we talk about races and then cheer zones or areas that you go through and there's spectators. And if I go through one of those and there's nobody making a crowd, I'm the first one that's raising my hands up saying, make some noise. And the primary reason is you get that charge of adrenaline. And it might just be enough at that point in time that it kicks you into gear and says, I can finish this or I'm going to pick up the pace. It happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's and like any other sport, and it's one of those things where I think the idea of being a spectator for something like a marathon, I think a lot of people would be like, well, they're just going to run by it. But I think, like you said, the amount of good you can do by just cheering people on. And I still remember a 5K that I did. I was doing my own strategy, but it was like to raise money for the Boy Scouts or something. And I always came off slow and then would catch up near the end. But there was a turn, and the Boy Scouts were sitting there, and they started making fun of me and saying, you're in last place. Why don't you give up? You're so like fat and slow and whatever else. And I didn't wind up coming in last, but it broke my spirit a little bit. And it was one of those things where, again, it can go either way. So I would encourage people, whether it's, your church's 5K to raise money for whatever, or it's, the New York City Marathon, get out just based on, like what Mark's saying, get out and cheer for people. And trust me, they're gonna appreciate it. Even if you don't know what to say, just clap. I'm in, and that's you don't know them. Say, hey, you'll see their number. Hey, number 37, looking good, and you might drag that person out of, I can't do it. I'm going to stop. I can't do it, and then they go on.
You run Boston, you run New York, you run Chicago, and it is nonstop. In New York or Boston, they're typically 5 to 10 people deep the entire course. So it's just like a huge cheer zone the entire time. You will connect with somebody out on that course that you'll be at a point in time, I am anyway, where somebody will say something, they'll have a funny sign, or they'll give you something that to eat or drink out of the ordinary. I mean, the first time I ran Disney, and I've run Disney, the Goofy Challenge 4 different times. When the first time I ran Disney, I did my fastest marathon ever, and I high-fived and took a picture with every character that was on the entire course.
Excellent.
It was a ball. Enough so that it kept me come back and say, was that a fluke? Can I do this again? Can I have fun doing it? Unfortunately, I've never run as fast, but I've had a lot of fun along the way.
Contrast that with when you run a trail race, because it's a very different feel, yes?
Absolutely. On a trail race, for me, it's a zone. I get in the place where it's, I look around. It depends upon the trail race, because you can go in a lot of places where it's very technical, a lot of roots, a lot of rocks, trees that you're weaving in and out of, uphill, downhill, extreme uphill, downhill, mud, water, rivers that you're going through. Your focus is probably going to be a little bit different. But when you get to that aid station is typically where you're going to find somebody. I've run Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, Idaho, some places where it's just when you're out there, you're on your own. But when you run into another runner, you have that camaraderie that you may only be 2 or 3 of you that are there, but you'll have that same camaraderie just in a smaller scale.
And there's this gladiatorial sense. This happens in powerlifting as well, of we who are about to die salute you. And I've competed twice in powerlifting. Yeah, so that the classic, gladiator thing. And I've competed. I competed once in bodybuilding and twice in powerlifting. And everybody is so cool because, again, by the time you get to the thing, the hard work is really pretty much done. In bodybuilding, it's 100% done. Like, except for what you're going to eat before you go on stage, because that can make a difference. No one's lifting you for size backstage of a bodybuilding thing. You're pumping up but you literally, so everyone's super cool. At powerlifting, yes, you're going to compete, but again, unless you think you're going to beat somebody, which here's the thing, this will never happen to me, although I did win my age group in the last thing I did. But if I ever thought I was going to actually win a powerlifting thing, the last thing I would do was try to psych out my opponent. I'd be the first one rubbing his back and being like, you got this. Get out there on that platform and kick my ass. Because I don't want to be that sort of undercutting person. But in the world where you're not, why not cheer for the other people? I want them to do well because I know how much work it is. It's the same thing when you're doing that. Like whether again, it's just that little pat on the ass on that single track trail as the guy goes around you. I mean, whatever it is, like that, because they understand what it takes to get there. And someone who's not done it, they don't know it.
You asked earlier about other people that have not had the experience of running. To your point right there, if they have been down that path, they know what it takes. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be right there on your side, rooting you on. That to me is the key to coaching. If you can understand what it takes to get from point A to point B, whether it's a 5K or a 100-miler, if you can comprehend that and build in a strategy that focuses on the mind part of that, the body's capable of doing so much. The mind is, in my opinion, what typically tells us, I can do that or I can't do that. And I really see that in running. We put benchmarks ahead of us. The clock is one of them. Mm-hmm. The distance is the other part of it. We put those roadblocks in front of us that say, I can't get that done until you actually do it. It's a lot of fun. 26 years I've stood on the sidelines of the Especially For You race and been a solo voice that says, you can do this. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
That's super cool. And you're such a positive guy that like half of my guests we've had so far, before we started recording and emails, Pastor, like, what are we going to talk about? I'm not interested. No, you're a super cool guy. So we're over an hour in, and we could sit here and tell running stories all day, and I would love it. But I want to make sure in the time remaining we talk about a couple of things that I really want to talk about. And the first one I want to mention that you mentioned, I didn't know you were part of it until you said it earlier in this interview. There is a super cool marathon around here that you guys call Crandic. And for those of you that want to look it up, it's for Cedar Rapids in Iowa City. So it's spelled Crandic. And I was so jealous when you guys announced it because, like I said, I've always wanted to do a marathon. And because it spans 2 different cities and 2 different counties, because because usually the marathons are in loop and you're back to whatever. So tell us a little bit about Crandic and how you guys thought of it, and I'm sure it's one of your babies. So talk to us about that.
It is a long thought of. I mean, for 15 plus years, you can probably go back farther than that. Members of the running community have tried to figure out a way to do a marathon between those two cities. Crandic, in terms of the title, was never even considered at that point. There is the Crandic Railroad. This is independent of that, completely different. A couple of years ago, Think Iowa City, which is the Visitors and Conventions Bureau, Josh Schamberger and his team, and then Doug Newman, who was with Economic Alliance in Cedar Rapids, and I, we got together, and Josh had been doing some work with a long-standing member of the community that had this concept. Most of us had never figured out a way to do it because 965 was not an option. Today, there still isn't a trail that will take us between those communities that is a marathon distance. Once the proposal was put forward to public safety that it existed, that you might be able to close part of 965, then it became an option. 3 years ago, we met in August, announced the race in early October, probably a little prematurely, because it meant that what we're basically doing is we came up with the concept, brought it to fruition, and then said, hey, world, we're going to go do this. And while we're doing it, we're planning it. But it is a marathon, half marathon. We've incorporated both a 5K, 10K. We included part of the river run, which was a long-standing 5K in Iowa City initially. And it's metamorphosed into the transition. Both of those business entities are driven with the idea of let's have an economic impact in our community, both Think Iowa City and the Economic Alliance. Initially, as president of the Corridor Running Club, I brought it to the board and said, I think this is something that we should do. There was a little resistance. It's a big gamble to take and try and create a marathon that's a point-to-point. For those of you who don't know, a loop is very easy. A loop means that, when you run and you start and finish in the same spot. Across 2 counties, across 7 municipalities. Although we have been in existence since 1982 as a club, we've never quite gone to that extent. So the three of us put our heads together, and through the first 2 years of tutelage, I think we did a great job. First year we had about 3,100 runners that participated in the race. We earmarked our activity, our funds, our revenues went back to the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Community School Districts, donated roughly $70,000 through the first 2 years of that. And that focus will continue. Corridor Running is a nonprofit organization. You can define it either way. We're a running group that has a nonprofit problem, or we're a nonprofit that has a running problem. Yeah. The hair group that's out there is a running group that has a drinking problem. All of that's incorporated. We certainly had some beverages at the end of the race, but the idea is to start in Iowa City and bring the corridor together. Our organization historically was Cedar Valley Running Association. When you think of the news, you listen to Channel 7 News locally, Cedar Valley, Cedar Valley, Cedar Valley. It doesn't incorporate Cedar Rapids or Iowa City as much as it does Cedar Falls, Waterloo. So we changed our name a few years back to Corridor Running. And as such, we really focus on everything that's in this community. But Corridor Running is taking it over this year. It will be from Cedar Rapids to Iowa City. We are in the process of soliciting volunteers to help. That's probably our biggest part. And the course side of it. I'm looking for some individuals who will help us design that course. I was the course director last year. The best thing I could have happen was hills at the end of the course. The guy that took second place came to me and said, I had to walk up that last hill. And that, to me, is a pretty good thing. First year we finished in Kinnick. Mm-hmm. You walk up or you run up, whichever, the hill going up to Kinnick. And, it's a challenge. It's not an easy thing for a lot of runners to do, but, we've had almost 6,000 participants in the last couple of years join us on it. So
yeah, I've had a handful of patients that ran Krandik, and like I said, it's one I really wanted to do. First of all, because I live in the corridor and I love the corridor. I like the idea of traveling.
Yep.
And so anybody listening who's not from Iowa, if you're listening from Iowa, you heard him just say they need volunteers. So we're going to have the website linked down below for Krandik. So please do volunteer or run. But if any of you are listening that think of us as a flyover state, first of all, Des Moines hosts a hell of a marathon, and I'm from Des Moines, and they get some really good runners in there. But think about coming. Cedar Rapids has an airport. It's the second biggest city in Iowa. You can fly in, and it's a really cool one. Back in the days in medical school, when I was looking at if I could ever get to marathon distance, I looked at Detroit, which runs into Canada. And I thought, what a cool idea that in the middle of doing that, you would actually travel into a different country. Yeah. Like it's a little kitschy, but I like the idea of it. Like that you start in Lynn County and you finish, especially at the football stadium. They do a 5K. I did the first one ever, the kickoff to Kinnick, and you finish on the in the stadium and on the field, and that was kind of cool. Did you found corridor running, or are you?
Corridor running is no. I was not actually. I didn't live in the community when it was originally founded. There's a few of the original members that started that group living in the area yet. In 1982, it was just a group of local runners that said, we want to organize some races. The difference with us and most clubs is that we also put on races. There's social media groups in the area that have a great draw for runners. But our primary focus is, one, raising revenue to donate back to the nonprofits. And we're a little unique in that. We donate to other nonprofits in the communities. Habitat for Humanity, the Shelter House in Iowa City, things of that nature. We have donated to the trail systems where you can add trails or you put water fountains out on the trails, New Bow Market. No, I've actually been part of this group since 2004. Okay. I was nominated as president a couple years ago and have a lot of fun doing it. So
how many people are a part of it, and what does it take to join? I assume there are dues and things like that?
Yeah, our dues, because we're a nonprofit, are tax deductible. You can join for, depending upon whether you're a student, a veteran, or just a normal member of the community, is between $15 and $20. And
for a year?
Per year. What we do for that is that we give a discount on each of our races. This year, going into this year, it was 7 races. Going forward, it's 9 races. So you get a discount that is essentially greater than the cost of the membership. In addition to that, we do some social events during the course of the year that we invite people. We do a circuit prize, so those who run our races at the end of the year get shirts or marketing things that are fun. A couple of social parties during the course of the year. We do a bus trip to Ames. We've always done a bus trip to Ames for Midnight Madness. That's a race that's been in existence 43 years. It's started out as a midnight marathon, and it ended up being a 5 or a 10K.
Yeah, I always wanted to run that one because it'd be at night in the dark. Yep. And I just think it's so unusual.
We talked earlier about some races, not to interrupt you, but some of the most fun races are after dark races.
Oh yeah, we
got one coming up next year, a local run that is it'll start after dark.
I'll have to look that one up. But one of the things to talk about trails. I mean, trail runners have these like vicious arguments about headlamps versus handhelds and whatever else. But and just to be clear, because we're pitching your club right now. If somebody were to say to you, well, like I'd join something like that, but I'm not a very good runner, and people that are going to join a running club are going to be super elite, whatever. Is that true? Or
I think historically that moniker probably sticks to most running clubs. The reality of it is that the majority of us are social runners or we're there for encouragement. I don't mean social and that's the only time that we run. We're there to have the camaraderie. We're there to get coaching. A couple of things that we do. We do a couch to 5K. For the person that is inexperienced runner, through a course of 9 weeks, we basically start with ground zero. We run 30 seconds, off 30 seconds, a combination of things. And the end of that culminates in we do a 5K. Mm-hmm. We started this year where we do the same thing. We do a 5K to 10K, and then we culminate that at the end with a 10K race. It doesn't take an experienced person to show up. it is intimidating as heck to show up.
You can say hell, it's okay.
It's intimidating as hell to show up to run when you don't know the people that are around you, because all the assessments that we do, they look at your shoes, they look at your running gear, they look at your body stature, irregardless of that. As a runner, 51 years of history running, the most fun I have is the Costa 5K class. You're getting people that are concerned about somebody else's image, and in reality, you peel back all the layers of the onion, and it is about you. At the end of the day, what you can do. How do we get you from point A to point B and have fun doing it?
Yeah, I read something years ago. I'm almost sure it was Iowa State, but they had a marathon class, and the final was they went to the Drake Relays and they ran it, and they ran as a group, and the idea was, and they didn't fail people that didn't do it because they couldn't really do that, but the idea was, this was a part of it, and I think if I'm recalling, it's a long time ago, but most of them showed up and did it. They sort of did it together, and again, it's this group mentality of when we're weak as an individual, we can be strong as a group, and even if you're not going as fast, we got your back. And
we do a lot of group runs during the course of the week. Any day of the week in this area, you can find somebody to run with, either by connecting through social media or there's an organized run. We do Tuesday night at track. It is a series of, from April through October, training for speed. And the idea is not to take the elites and make them faster. It's to take you and me and say, okay, how do I elevate my time? How do I get faster through a series of transitions? Saturdays and Sundays, you can find group runs, North Liberty, Iowa City, Coralville, Cedar Rapids.
Yep.
There's always a group that is led by somebody, and it is not the fastest runner that's leading that group.
Yeah. And probably in whatever other cities you live in as well.
Yeah.
What are benefits that you see of training with a group versus training solo?
I like the solo because it gives me more head time. I can think about whatever I want with a lot less distractions. The advantage of running with somebody is accountability. Mm-hmm. You are now comparing, or somebody's holding you accountable for that run, walk, endurance, duration, distance, whatever it is. That's probably the number one thing I would think about that.
Yeah.
Safety, certainly with all the
Sure.
activity that goes on, there's concerns about those. That's probably what I would isolate those with.
Yeah, for sure. I as well was much more a fan of the solo piece, but every now and then on a trail or at some place in medical school, someone would run with me. And one of the things you hear people talk about when you're doing distance is running at conversation pace.
Yes.
And when you're by yourself, now I was a professional actor, so talking to myself doesn't bother me at all. And I'd run around my little neighborhood in North Carolina, and to test myself, I'd just start talking out loud. And if people saw me and thought I was crazy, no one ever called the police. But there was something about every now and then a friend from school would see me and would run with me on the trail, and I would say to him, listen, I'm going to walk. So if you want to run with me, we're going to run at my pace. And if you don't want to, I'm cool with that. But I'm not going to run faster because you think we should, or I'm not going to take a walk break because I'll wind up getting hurt. And inevitably, they would just sort of go with me. And then we would chat, and I would always use it as an opportunity to check myself, because as you can tell, I like to talk to people, of how am I doing? And then I would sort of, if I needed to slow down a little bit, I could base it on that. So
yeah, we talked earlier about people going out of the chutes too fast. I'm working with a group of runners right at the moment. They're doing a marathon in another week. And historically, they would start strong and peter out. Mm-hmm. And the concept that I introduced to them is you have to run, but you cannot stop talking. You
Right.
have to be a conversational pace that entire time. And we went from being able to not being able to do over 4 miles to where they're doing in excess of 20 miles. The pace has changed, and that's been the biggest part of it, conversation.
Sure. So,
Besides, you're going to learn a ton of stuff about people. You have no idea. You can go to places that you wouldn't even think about. You're in the kind of a safe zone, even though you're uncomfortable. You're in a pretty safe environment with just a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah. There's a great movie called Spirit of the Marathon, and part 2 is not really worth your time, with all due respect to the filmmakers. But part 1 is amazing, and you get to see Dina Castor and some other really famous people. But the best part of the movie is not Dina Castor, and I won't tell you what happens. I don't want to spoil it. And the other guy and the famous guy. The best part is the real people with quotes. I'm sorry, Dina, and the other guy, you're real people. But I mean the non-elites. That are all shapes and sizes. There's a guy that's older, and it's just super cool. So to wrap up a little bit, talking about the Corridor Running Club, again, we're going to have the stuff linked down below. If you live in this area, it sounds like Mark and his group would love to have you out, and they're doing a lot of good stuff. So we definitely want to promote what you're doing. I think it's cool, not just because, again, I think the idea would be, it's a running club. They're running, but you're contributing to the community, and you're doing lots of other kind of cool stuff.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We donate. I mean, roughly of our revenues, we donate in excess of 10% of everything that we get back to social, another nonprofit and the other nonprofits in the area. But in essence, we do one of two things: we either donate that money back to the community, or we use that towards our future races.
Cool.
And as an offshoot from that, you get. There's been a plethora of people in the last 10 years, 15 years that have said, I'm going to go do a 5K. I'm going to go create a 10K as a way to generate revenue. And what we see, we talked earlier about the color runs and things like that, is people don't realize the complexity that it goes into organizing one of those and the magnanimity of what's all involved. It works fairly well as a source of revenue for some of the groups that are out there for a period of time, and then that people realize that it's a lot of labor involved.
Yeah.
As an offshoot from that, you also then, like I said earlier, we created a trail race. This is our 5th year for one that's done at a local park. You do a 15, 30, or 45K race that goes around this, the lake at Pleasant Creek. It's a fun run. It's competitive. We have guys that are coming to this, guys and gals from California, from Pennsylvania, and the ones that are winning the North Face challenges and things like that, they all come and run local because there's some great running in this area. And I've run across the state of Iowa 6 times as part of a group. People think the state is flat. You got the East Coast and the West Coast and everything in the middle, and the dichotomy of people and the diversity of terrain is just phenomenal.
People that think Iowa is flat, they're thinking about Kansas and western Nebraska. Come and run or come and ride RAGBRAI, and then come back and tell me that you think this state is flat. Yeah. Again, these are people that think of us as flyover states and have never really been here. There's an awful lot of trees and an awful lot of hills in this state. The glacier didn't wipe us out the way that it did western Nebraska and Kansas and so forth. So.
Spirit of the Marathon is a movie that we're actually going to show to I do some volunteer work through a couple of the local prisons, and we just purchased that movie to show that to them in advance of the marathon. They'll see it next week.
And that's what we're going to talk about here in just a minute. There's one more question I want to ask you before we talk about the real reason that I kind of met you, which was this thing about the thing with the prison. It's so awesome. But if you look at the videos we've posted so far and the ones that have been our most consumed, our very first guest was a dietitian. And, running is, I don't know if we call it an extreme sport, but it's an endurance sport and it requires a lot of different things. You're obviously an accomplished runner. Like, what do you do specifically for nutrition and hydration? What are your thoughts on kind of the various popular diets and so forth? Like, if you were doing your coaching, what are some things you would tell people about diet and running?
Well, I worked for a company that produced some new products for a while, and Ralph Nader and a few other people that were out there had some serious commentary about the effect of excess. So I tend to migrate towards moderation, and that's especially holds true. I remember when we were in high school and college wrestling that it was you have to eat all the protein bars. Everything has to be protein focused. And then that fad seemed to go away. I eat a normal routine diet. I call it a diet. Other people look at me and say, you don't eat some of the fast food restaurants. I eat meat. I eat potatoes. I eat the normal foods that I was raised with. However, I do it in moderation. I'm not a big fan of a lot of the substitute nutrition energies. When I set up a race, I want to eat normal food when I go out. I'm not Dean Karnazes that will eat a whole pizza or two, but I might have a slice of pizza or a chicken noodle soup or rice or tortillas as you're running, as opposed to gels or goos or protein bars. That's the general rule of thumb I would tell with everybody that's running. Eat what you're accustomed to, but there's nutritional things that fall within that. We had a runner that I'm training right now that made a habit of eating broccoli before he went out to eat. Well, broccoli has an effect on you that he realized. We were joking about it last night. I can't run and eat broccoli. It is what it is.
Unless it propels you forward faster by all the gas coming out the backside. Back when I used to run, runners would talk about the walkie-talkies, which if you've never heard that term before, it means with every step, some gas is emitted. And they used to say, if you can do more than 4, it's impressive. So as you're going out, right? So, right now, like you mentioned the protein thing, in the weightlifting world, it's still very much alive and powerful do you do the carnivore diet, the keto diet, the paleo diet, and then, obviously on the other end of that would be the plant-based diets, vegetarian, vegan. I mentioned Scott Jurek. If you want to make an argument for Scott Jurek being the most accomplished ultra runner in history, you would have a decent case to do that. Vegan from Minnesota, so grew up eating meat and so forth. I don't know if you have any specific opinions based on what you just said. I mean, eat in moderation and eat sort of modestly, but do you have any thoughts about some of those? I don't want to call vegan a fad because I've got enough friends that do it. But to me, the carnivore diet, the keto diet, the paleo is very faddish. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about some of those.
I have a friend that we were talking yesterday that consumes fat as part of the diet. I know there's an accomplished runner in the area that runs 100-milers and struggles with the last part of it. And I think it's because of the diet. Hydration probably is the first thing that most people underhydrate. And then beyond that, the calories, I always equate it. I talked about it last night with a group that I was working with. You can hit that gas pedal when you floor the car, and you can go 90 miles an hour, and you're gonna run out of gas fairly soon. Or you can hit it at 25 and go probably a lot farther. Well, the calories going in are a reflection, in my opinion, of the efficiency of that engine coming out. Mm-hmm. If you eat a balanced, it could be you adapt. A good friend of mine a year ago was working solely on a keto diet. There's some adaptation that goes with adjusting the mechanics of your body, the physiological changes that you go through to get to that point. I don't know that it's. I'm that middle of the road guy. I'm the one that's saying moderation on things that I don't eat a lot of the chemical byproducts.
Sure.
So I guess Adam, if I had to say it, I'm skirting the issue. I'm good with just about anything that's out there because I've seen enough people that the guy that steps up next to me that weighs 50 pounds heavier than me that eats all 7 days a week. I worked for a guy one time that for almost a year we ate 7 days a week at McDonald's. I felt like at the end of that I probably had no harm to McDonald's, but I felt like there was some byproduct that I wasn't as efficient. I think you look at Scott Jurek, you look at some of the runners that are there's some phenomenal things that they're doing, but that machine has been so fine-tuned through that trial and error of I can do this. I've changed the mechanics of how my body burns fat. I've changed no carb diet, the keto, those kinds of things. I don't know if I'm giving you an answer really, but there's enough people that the result has still been winning their age group, winning their titles, that I think you could find everybody that's out there. I ran with a gal from California for the longest period of time, and what I found out that her success was, it was predicated on a lot of dairy product. I can't eat a lot of dairy product. Mm-hmm. I discourage people from eating dairy when they go run long distance because I think it has other side effects.
It does.
But that was her success.
I think it's a testament to the fact that the human body has evolved over so much time that you can feed your body a lot of crap, and in some cases it can perform. And what I get a lot is people that will say, well, my fill in the blank, my grandpa, uncle, whatever, smoked 3 packs a day and lived to be 96. Yeah. Right. So he won the lottery in terms of that. But, it's a little bit like, this is a bit of a weird metaphor, but if you watch professional golfers that they're on the tour, so they're obviously good, no swing looks the same. And you can say the mechanics of a golf swing are X, Y, Z. And I can't remember the name of the guy that had that weird twisty swing that everybody was always like, no one else in the world can hit a golf ball that way. So it's hard to argue with, you can say Jurek, but then if you look at one of the other ones that eats meat and animal products, and now what's their longevity of health, we're getting into a whole other topic. But no, I think you answered it beautifully because, you're a coach, you're obviously an accomplished runner. I just kind of wanted to know what you would think about that.
I've got a good friend that has run 200 plus marathons and has been very meticulous in his entire tenure of running those in terms of food, very controlled, prescripted, and yet still had health problems.
Yeah.
And that's where genetics come into play. So I've seen both ends of it. I prefer the leaner, lighter,
Sure.
more consumable, rapid consumption, less.
Well,
less chemicals.
You make an excellent point of eat real food. One of my favorite books, and he's actually going to be at a conference I'm going to be at soon. His name is T. Colin Campbell. He's a plant-based researcher, but one of his books is Whole, W-H-O-L-E, and he doesn't promote eating animal products, but the idea is even plant-based products. So an Oreo is vegan, but you would never catch him telling you to eat an Oreo. It's eat not olive oil olives, not a broccoli smoothie broccoli. Don't juice it, eat it. And so that's kind of what you said. I don't eat a lot of processed stuff. I don't want the goos and the chomps and the chews and the Cliff Bars are pretty delicious. Yeah. But I mean, stuff like that. And so definitely that's kind of what I wanted to ask about.
To your point, though, I think the difference is if that's everything you consume or it's the extreme.
Right, sure.
Race day, I tell people all the time, you've earned it. Eat whatever you want that day.
After.
Take as much garbage in as you want.
After.
Exactly.
After.
You've earned that.
My first 10K, I should show you pictures on my Facebook page. My first ever 10K, I was in medical school. It was a Halloween run in Virginia Beach, and one of my medical school friends, we dressed up as Smurfs. And I made it to, I was in the 5th mile. The makeup started to run into my mouth. Ooh. As if that wasn't bad enough, we were on the boardwalk. I could see the finish. I thought it was closer. It was not. It was way farther away than I thought. But so like how they hand out stuff at aid stations. Mm-hmm. One of the things I loved about 5Ks is that I always run past the aid station. I'm sorry, you don't need a water stop in a 5K. And frankly, I would choke on the water sometimes. But anyway, so we were close to the end, and I went past an aid station, and they handed me a little Dixie cup full of candy. And I looked at it, and I was getting ready to throw it away, and I pulled out a piece of candy corn, which I love and never would let myself eat back in those days. And I thought, I'm so close. And I ate it, and I was sick as, oh my God, in the last, and I kept thinking, why isn't the finish line getting any closer? And I just thought, oh, you broke it. I've got this, I'm drinking this makeup, and I ate that thing, and it was like, oh God, never again. So after the race, you can you can celebrate and so forth. But
same thing on race day. I tell people all the time, don't do something different. Right. Don't eat something that you're unaccustomed to.
And don't wear something you haven't done. You're asking for chafing, and you need some of that body glide stuff. Some of that. So all right. So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about this. The reason that you came to my attention is a mutual friend that we have, who works for Oakdale Prison and the IMCC, which is the Iowa Medical Classification Center, was telling me about this awesome thing that you're doing, and I totally Google stalked you and read some stories about you. So without me ruining it, tell us about that and what you're doing and where the idea came from. I'm so excited to hear about this.
There is you referenced earlier, a guy by the name of Bill Bowerman, which goes way back. He started a marathon in Oregon Prison. I think it's 8 plus years that I've traced back in its history. About 6 years ago, there was an article in Runner's World magazine that referenced that marathon. And at the local prison, Iowa Men's Classification Center, One of the inmates had read that and asked if there would be an opportunity to do a running program in this prison. Our local friend, our mutual friend, reached out to our running club at that point in time, and the response was no. We're not interested in that. There was a certain, we talked earlier about the elites and the normal people. There was a certain aura that goes with being associated with a prison. And that was a program that I believe that this individual at the time said, we don't want that connection. I don't know why. It resonated with me. And I reached out to the prison, the head dietitian at that point in time, and said, I'll do whatever I can do. Let's just meet and talk it over. And we met that summer 5 years ago, and then just through a series of follow-up appointments with inmates, came to the conclusion that we would start a running program. And we started with a couch to 5K. Through a series of 9 or 10 weeks, every week we talk about, okay, you do this, you stretch. I mean, things that you think most of us would take for granted. Everything that an inmate is issued is a Converse shoe or is cotton. So you're wearing cotton underwear, you're wearing cotton T-shirts. Well, if anybody has worn cotton in Iowa or in hot climate, guess what happens?
Soak that water right into it.
It soaks it up, and it is abrasive. So you'd end up with irritants. You talked about body glide. You'd end up with chafing marks, all the way to different ways to tie shoes that eliminate sore spots or toenails or slipping on the heels. To even teaching people about, running is nothing more than an elevated pace of walking. Sounds pretty minute, but I mean, no pun intended, but some of the guys, the only running that they had done, some of them, was the only running they'd done was from the law.
From the cops, yeah.
I mean, and we joked all about that, but we got a new warden somewhere along the line,
That's right.
When this warden came on board, it was there's obviously in a penal institute, there's different ways to look at it. You're either there for punishment or rehab or both, and the staff. That vacillates back and forth. Even the inmates sometimes think, we had a guy this week say that there's basically 3 people that are there. The innocent, the ones that think they're innocent, and the guilty, roughly. But that's how we started. Came from Runner's World, Oregon Marathon. We have done, I believe, 8 5Ks or half marathons within the last 5 years inside this prison institute. A year and a half ago, we picked up an additional one, which is at Anamosa. It's a maximum security prison. We started with just a 5K class as well. We've done now 3 activities up there, 3 sessions of 5K. The one here at Oakdale, though, it's become a year-round. We built a small infrastructure of a hierarchy that basically has a club. That club was accountable for establishing some bylaws. And there's a theme to my madness out of this. They raised some funds. Through that funds, we established that we had to go back and donate some of that revenue back to the community. Trust me, in prison, you're working, you're not making a whole lot of money. So for them to donate $1 or $2, that might be a day or 2 or 3 days worth of wages. But what we did is we created a 5K. We subsequently, the warden, the first one we did, we had over 250 inmates that participated,
That's so awesome.
was the biggest event that had happened in this prison. The warden looked at us and was like, "What's going on here?" Very receptive and very supportive. It's just been a real treat along there. The thing that when we started this, I have a slight history that is irrelevant to the whole story, but I've been on the victim end of that, and on a very personal level. So the club president at that time looked at me and said, "You'd be a great success story. We want to show to the community that somebody can forgive, and this is a reflection on our club." And I looked at it and said,
this isn't about me. This is about the inmates and what they're capable of doing. And I mention that only from the perspective of that's the focus that we've had all along. The warden has allowed us. When I go in there and talk with the inmates, and of the 8 races that we've done, we've had a number of outsiders that have come in and run with us, male, female. To date, we've had no incidents of any threats or any security issues that go. Obviously, they watch us fairly close.
Sure.
They monitor everything that comes in and out. But we got this. We've worked it up to the point. We did a half marathon again in the spring, and we made a qualification that if you completed that half marathon, that we would do a marathon in the last weekend in October.
Okay.
And it is right around the corner.
It's coming up real
We've
fast.
got 7 guys that have been training for it. Without naming names or accomplishments, we created, just like everybody else, a training log. We created a program that includes nutrition. We've taught them about, we take it for granted, the kind of boxer briefs that we wear. We've been able to get them a nylon material that doesn't cause chafing on the legs. We've introduced Body Glide because of I don't know where to begin. All the little things from tying shoes. This warden allowed them to go out and buy some shoes on the outside, so that it was a little bit more conducive to running a longer run than it was in the Converse shoes, Chuck Taylors. But
so they bought shoes with their own money, and they're allowed to keep them. In their cells with them. And you mentioned nutrition. I mean, I would think that the standard fare at a prison would not be, we were just talking about it, right? Not be the optimal probably for a marathon distance run. Were they able to bolster their caloric intake somehow, or how has that gone?
Yeah, for all practical purposes, it's an environment that is a microcosm of outside, right? Except for what brought everybody together there. And I don't eat their food every day, but their dietary restrictions have not changed. What we've been able to do since we worked through the head nutritionist, the head dietitian, that she's been able to work with the inmates that are either diabetic or that have special needs. We do a lot of things with sugar, just to compare how much sugar is in a product. To say, we do this right now. Gatorade is a beverage that is oftentimes consumed for athletic activities, but it's also one of those beverages that people drink a lot of just because it's a beverage.
Right. Popular name, reasonable taste.
The perception that what it does for you. So you dial through all of those things and cut to the chase, and say, your basic food groups are what you need to make sure that you're covering. Protein, some sugar, but potassium and the sodium. It's been real interesting in working with them. Typical runner will start out and say, I don't need to eat or drink, just to explain to them, if you have a 2-pound weight loss, what that represents when you're running, and that's almost always fluid. As a doctor, you can correlate to what it does to the blood and the thickness and of the blood, and then the slowing of the heart rate and the acceleration, maybe not the acceleration of or the slowing of the heart rate, but the acceleration of fatigue.
Right.
So you teach them, I got to eat, I got to drink, and then the quantities of it. One of the guys has I have a picture of him from a year ago, a race that we did. He's got a nice little pot belly at him, and and his wife lately has been, you lost so much weight. Why? Well, the difference is he's in I don't want to call it fighting shape, but in a running condition.
Sure.
He's
ready for a
burning more
marathon.
calories than, and that's the key to me at the institution is that there are plenty of calories, not always the expenditures of those calories.
Sure, and quality calories and things like that. So 7 people that are inmates, and then you said there'll be outside people coming in to run as well.
Yeah, we have a couple of people that will run the full marathon with the inmates, and I say that carefully because training for a marathon or training for a run by yourself like the inmates for the most part have done, and then you introduce a third person, it throws things out of sequence.
Yeah.
So they're there as an outsider, not only to complete the distance, but to be supportive in if they're struggling, if there's questions that
Sure.
bring your or lend your experience to help them get through that. That's the whole idea. We have both male and female that are coming in. We're starting Saturday. We'll start a 5K at 8:30, and we've decided to start our marathoners at 9:30. And then hopefully, because of the time of year, the weather will be beautiful.
Yeah, hopefully.
And they'll be able to finish that. We've set a time limit of roughly 6 hours, which is common on the outside. You need to be able to run. That's basically a 13-minute mile pace.
And that's going to be on the 26th?
It is, October
Right.
26th.
So by the time this airs, that will probably be gone. So I would encourage everybody to go online and Google, because I'm sure that KCRG or the Gazette, which is Cedar Rapids, or what's the Iowa City one? I always blank
Press
on that
Citizen.
one. The Press Citizen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I think of the Ledger for some reason. Anyway, they'll probably have a thing about that. I just think that's such a cool thing. And so I worked at Oakdale for something like 3 years as a physician. I was moonlighting when I was in residency. And so I came to have a great fondness of the staff out there. The environment was not what I expected. Of course, my knowledge of prison came from television. And so I was expecting it to be like the TV show Oz. Like it was going to be people getting stabbed in the hallway and raped in the shower and all this stuff. And I still remember the first time I was there alone, walking down the hallway to the medical center. And the inmates are walking down the hall, hanging out with their friends. No one's. I mean, of course, there's cameras and there's guards, but not like right with them. And I found myself kind of in this hallway with 6 of them, and I thought, well, they could definitely take me down right now if they really wanted to. And they're always real nice, like, hey Doc, good to see you. And I was really struck by how straightforward everybody was. Of course, there was the occasional sociopath, right? It's prison.
Yeah.
But most people were like, I got caught. This is what I did. They were super cool about it. I actually stopped reading what they were there for because it's not really relevant to what I was doing. And it colored my opinion in some cases, and I'd rather deal with them just on a person-to-person thing. And my boss at the time, who now unfortunately is not there anymore, but Dr. Deal was the medical director at the time, who in a really weird roundabout way knew my wife from this little town she was from. We didn't know that until almost the end. Anyway, he said to me, remember, your job is not to be their jailer. We have other people whose job is to be their jailer. Your job is to be their doctor. And I was glad he said that, but I was just so struck by how cool everybody was. And so when I heard about this from Kelly, who you referenced, such a cool idea. I can imagine naysayers who would naysay on the side of prison is for bars and guards, and why are we letting them do something fun? And rather than me say what I think, what would you say to somebody that said something like that?
You make a great point. By virtue of the fact that they're in prison, that is a form of punishment. Things that we don't get to, that we take for advantage. For instance, early on somebody said, you get to run a hill. Nobody likes to run a hill, but you have that freedom to go outside to do that.
That's right.
That in and of itself, being confined in a restricted area 24 hours a day, is punishment. There's 2 schools of thought, in my opinion: rehab or punishment. The prison that you've described is very much what I see. The inmates that are there have earned the privilege to be released out of their cell into a general population, to be able to go up and down the hallways, or to be able to go to the library, or to go into the yard. And it's through behavior then and now, not their crime, but that current behavior that has earned them that privilege. So you misbehave in that environment, you lose those privileges.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I, like you, only once have I tried to find out what one inmate was in there for. It doesn't matter. The reality is that they've been adjudicated and put there for a reason. Whether they're innocent or guilty isn't my place to make that judgment.
You weren't on the jury.
I was not. I look at them when I go in and say, my focus is more singular. How do I either improve your health? How do I make you have more fun? How do I give you a weight loss program? How do we create an environment that gives you an alternative to? Running for a lot of people, probably myself, is an addiction. And it can be a substitute addiction for other misbehaviors, right? There's a plethora of stories out there. There is a great movie that was just released. It's a documentary called Skid Row Marathon. Skid Row Marathon is about a judge in California that took some, I will use the word loosely, miscreants, and said, join me on this journey. That from a murderer to a lot of different crimes that have turned their life around because of an activity that gave them singular focus. I'm a little anal by nature. Running teaches you discipline. Mm-hmm. And when I said earlier there was a method to my madness to get from point A to point B, setting up the bylaws or the rules or things like that, it isn't about immediate gratification. There's a runner out there that can leave today and go run a marathon tomorrow and kick my ass in the process. But the majority of us have to have some kind of a strategy to get there. And that's, if I could say that I'm contributing one thing, and I think that Kelly, through the program the warden allowed us to do, is to kind of lay that out and say, if you want to do this, you got to figure out how to accomplish something without stealing it, taking it, lying about it,
buying it. You can't buy your way into a marathon. Yep. One of the things my sister used to say in triathlon is that you can buy yourself speed on the bike. You can't buy yourself speed on the marathon. You either trained for it or you didn't. Yeah. And so I was very struck in prison when I worked there that, with all due respect, it felt like rehab was a secondary consideration in a lot of cases. And I understand the funding is not particularly what it ideally would be. But to me, somebody who would say, why should we let them do that? The health and so forth. But most people at Oakdale, and I don't know about Anamosa, maybe it's a bigger percentage, but not everybody is going to be there for the rest of their lives. Most of them are going to get out at some point. This is a skill and a hobby and a passion and activity that they can continue forever. And one of the things that I was a big fan of, and I am definitely left-leaning in my politics, but I have enough libertarian in me to say things like, I would like people to contribute. I'm okay with helping people, but I like it when people work a little bit. Mm-hmm. I was amazed that, and I think this should be expanded. People who were at Oakdale who wanted to would get GEDs, associate degrees. We need nurses in every city on the planet. And there are people that through OJT, by working down the medical center, working on the hospice floor, became CNAs, became LPNs. That is a degree, even with a felony on your record, that you can start to make something of yourself. So isn't that the goal? If the goal is just to punish and keep away from society for X number of years, why don't we just lock them in a closet? And there are people that would say we should. What a waste of time and space. Because I saw people work in the medical field with a passion for the other inmates because they still had to live there. The other nurses got to go home. Mm-hmm. But, they knew when they got back to the block, someone was going to ask them, how's Joe doing? And I made that up, by the way, Joe's name, obviously. But if it's like, well, screw him, I just didn't give him his whatever, they're going to be like, dude, what are you talking about? It's the potential of what you're doing is the lifetime skill. It's amazing.
It is not just, to your point, it's not just about running. It is about applying that discipline that you learn to a lot of other things. The inmates do a phenomenal job of policing themselves.
If somebody gets out of line, they lose privileges.
Right.
And most of them have earned that. And it's a couple of year process to get that privilege to say, I get to do this. I get to be part of this educational process, or the schooling, or the book clubs that come in on Sunday, or the religion, or the running group. You talk about the funding end of things. We started this out by the purchase of 7 TVs. We went to Best Buy, bought a $100 TV, donated it to the prison. People will look at me and say, you're absolutely nuts. We took the athletic equipment that was in the gym, turned it around so that the inmates could watch the TVs, and tripled the amount of activity that was going on those pieces of equipment by one process.
Totally.
It was a donation through community members. All of a sudden, that sparked a little interest that wasn't there before. It didn't cost us a whole lot of money to do that. Is that a gimme? Probably. We took the ability to buy a running shoe and went to the community and said, in fact, a couple of the shoe companies, Brooks has been phenomenal. They came to us and said, we'll sell you a shoe through a local retailer at a price that nobody else can get. That's a privilege that those guys have earned. The inmates, the staff can't even buy it at that price. I can't buy it at that price.
Great.
But their cost of living is considerably different.
Right.
They've been able to then adapt and run longer because of that. Now, the question was, can you transfer that to other institutions? And slowly but surely, that looks like it may come to fruition. I don't control any of that. That's all warden driven.
One of my favorite authors and speakers, who unfortunately now is dead, so I'll never get to see him, is Christopher Hitchens, a very outspoken atheist, journalist, wonderful debater. And he would always say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And you can apply it in so many different avenues of life. And so it's like, well, it's only 7 people doing that marathon. It's only one little prison in little flyover state Iowa that anybody only cares about when the 9 million candidates come through to caucus there. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Would it be better to have 1,000 people at Attica? Yeah, probably. But it's got to start somewhere. So I think what you're doing is it's just amazing. I can't wait to hear how it goes. And I mean, just think of a place like that can suck the hope right out of you. But think about what those 7 people are going to feel like when they cross that line. I haven't looked at these stats in a long time. We're talking about skills you can take forward. But if you look at, back when I was interested in running, if you look at the NCAA stats, the grade point average of the cross country and the track team is like astronomically higher than the football team and the wrestling team and the basketball team, who get all the money. I mean, I don't know how many fans go out and watch the Hawkeye cross country team. I guarantee you it is not as many as go out and watch the Hawkeye football team. But whose GPAs are killing it. Runners in general tend to be, I don't know if it's brighter, but because you have to have that meticulousness that you talked about, that can translate into how I study, how I whatever. And the thing is, it's not necessarily inherent. It can be learned like any other skill. So your inmates can take that forward and hopefully, which is the goal, become these productive members of society that don't repeat offend. We lower the recidivism rate. They become productive citizens. How is that not a colossal win?
Even before that, if you can have that same impact in that culture before they get released, you lower the arguments, the fights, the recidivism of activity that goes on there. That then is a stepping stone to success on the outside. And that's really, as naive as that might sound, it's really part of what I'm after. To have that impact that says, I got a letter last night. Makes me teary. For one of the inmates, my age, in my estimation, has learned more this year than the previous 60 plus years of his life. Because we've cut through, when you run, when you do something physical, when you do powerlifting, when you're religious motivated, whether you're at
whatever your focus is, when you cut through all that crap and you start to deal with your body and your mind, you discover some things. And in my opinion, he's learned more and is a better parent, even though he's in prison, to his kids and his wife than he ever has been.
Yeah.
And he unfortunately shared it with me, which I read it when I got home. Was we do training classes on Wednesday nights, and there's about a half a dozen. I don't follow up on them once they get released. I've heard from people that do in about a half a dozen cases of individuals that are staying on the outside, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
You know, I'm a prodigy of the 60s. I always believed that one voice could be heard. I've lived my motto that way. I run pretty independently that way. I practice that with people, and I'm naive enough to believe we can make a difference.
You're such a cool guy. I'm so glad we had you on. And guess what, man? We just hit 2 hours.
That's incredible.
So not sure what we're going to talk about, right, Mark? And like has been with pretty much every other guest, I feel like we could go on for another couple hours. We'll definitely have you back in the future. So I'm gonna do just a little quick wrap up and then give you the mic at the end. But we always sort of wrap up by saying, this is conversations with interesting people, and that if you know interesting people, like you mentioned the guy from the Iowa tourism thing, I mean, if you know interesting people in your club or in your personal life or so forth, we would love to have their names and we would love to have them on the show. For any of you listening, this is really about you guys, and it's who Cooper and I think are interesting, but it's definitely about what you want to. So if you have suggestions, whether it's topics or people of certain walks of life, if you know people, drop us a comment. My email is always listed down below. Hit us, and we'll get in touch with people. We actually have some really big guests coming up in November that we are super excited about. Just found out about a huge one today, so it's going to be awesome. So, Mark, the final word will be yours. Are there events, websites, social media stuff that you want to promote? It's yours, man. Go ahead. Take us home.
CorridorRunning.com. Facebook, social media. We do 9 races a year in the local community. We're a nonprofit organization. There are the prison runs that we do, the activities that are focused about that. I'm always looking for somebody to come in and share their story, as well to mentor or coach. I don't care, you're male, female. We've all got some backstory that you can relate to. As far as running as a form of my life, it is like I've said, it is a form of catharsis, is therapy. I enjoy it. It is done in moderation for me. I would welcome anybody to join us on any of our runs. Hit me up socially, hit me up personally. If I can help you in any capacity, we'll certainly be able to do that. We'll do everything we can. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Mark, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you right back here the next time that we record. Take care, everybody.